She was the principal, and it was a very good time. I enjoyed it enormously. Getting back in the classroom, and I had some super students there as well.
This is a little different though, because these kids are becoming a little bigger than kids. They're not 14 and 15, they're a little older now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you had the similar problems, not so much in terms of antisocial behavior, but laziness. And there was the big rubber tree when all the kids would sit under there holding hands and discovering
each other.
Exactly. But the serious students did very well. And to this day, the students that we recruit from COB to go off to college do exceptionally well. They get a very good grounding at COB.
Talk to me about the College of the Bahamas, because while we want the best for the College of the Bahamas, you continue to hear these horror stories about College of the Bahamas. It gets a bad rap in some quarters.
It gets a bad press, and it's unfortunate because they have a very good staff. They have some very good dedicated teachers there that have been there for many years and have made a considerable contribution. It has its problems, obviously, and I think that for a long time I felt that they were heading the wrong direction, that the greatest need for the Bahamas was for a community college, which it was when it first started. And there's still a very great need for a community college. But no, unquestionably in terms of the product, at the top end, the serious students get a very good grounding, and when they go off to college, they are very well prepared, extremely well prepared.
And I know you wanted to get back into the classroom, and so that was one incentive to go to College of the Bahamas, but what else did you want to achieve when you went there?
Well, what
you thought you could do to...
Well, another thing was in terms of moving to another level, because UWI introduced the Bachelor of Education courses at COB as an external campus. And so I was recruited to teach at that level. So I taught right up to third year university level. And that was a real challenge. I'd never done that before. And it was principally teaching teachers. These were teachers in the system here who lacked qualifications. So I taught literature at that level, and that was a new experience and a new challenge. I found that interesting.
I'm sure trying to get these mature heads to soften up. How challenging was that? How different was that from teaching regular students?
It was very challenging, to be honest, because for one thing, I didn't have too much background in the literature courses. The UWI courses were mainly African and West Indian authors, so I had to do an awful lot of reading. And to be honest, the teachers themselves, a lot of them were not really university students of that caliber. I mean, they had the best intentions in the world and they tried very hard, but some of them had a real difficult time with it. So it was a struggle, but it had good results. UWI did the testing, and to be honest, I think out of a class of about 24, I got 15 or so through the course, which I thought was very good, and I enjoyed
pretty good percentage, yeah. Let me, and we were talking about literature, and I keep coming back to literature because I think it's a stepchild that people don't pay enough attention to. You like the position that literature has and commands in today's curriculum?
Yes, I do. I mean, looking back to the COB days, I can remember one of the outstanding students that I taught there was a fellow called Ian Strawn, now Dr. Ian Strawn, and he has his Track Road Theatre, he writes well. He's done a lot for drama here and has much to contribute. So yes, I think literature, I'd like to see more Bahamian literature, more writing locally, but that will come. You know, we're still a young nation, and it'll come.
But you've, throughout the years, going back to 1965 to today, the path that both English language and literature, but specifically literature, has traveled in the society? A good path?
It's been a rocky path, I think. And understandably so, because technology is unquestionably the way of the future, and that's what's taking over now in terms of what is really relevant to kids now. They have to know. And technology moves so quickly, and what is new one year is outdated the next year, and so on. So one can understand how the sciences and technology loom somewhat larger now than the fine arts, perhaps. But I hope that they'll never be superseded, because they have such an important part in the development of children.
Yeah, because, I mean, what's a computer compared to
a good
sonnet,
book.
a good sonnet?
Yeah, and a good book, yes,
You know?
of course.
Yeah. But College of the Bahamas, and you stay there for what?
7 years.
You stayed there for 7 years?
I was there from 81 to 87, 6 years, I guess. Yeah.
Ready to leave then? Good offer? You thought it was time to move on?
No, I then got a good offer again. It was a kind of desperation move. St. Andrew's School had hired a headmaster of the upper school, and he came out, and I think it was round about the time that Loftus Roker was in command. And anyway, this guy had sold his house and taken his family and everything else to come over, and he never got a work permit. So my good friend Dave Jenner, who was the deputy head there and was also a Rotarian with me, said to me one time, "Oh, for God's sake, Roger, please apply for this job." He said, "I'm driving me crazy trying to do the two jobs." So, I thought, well, why not? And so I went and I got the job of deputy head and headmaster of the high school at St. Andrews, which was like turning the clock back in many ways to the early Queen's College. It was, again, a small school. You had Queen's got quite big.
Yeah.
And I like the small school setting. I think you get to know the kids better. They perhaps react better.
Yeah. I guess you couldn't say, at that point when you went to Queen's in 65, more of a developmental situation.
Yeah.
You wouldn't say the same thing for St. Andrews, would you?
Well, I think so, because when I went to St. Andrews, they were very isolationist, and they had this reputation as being an elitist school, and they still do. But both Dave Jenner and I felt strongly that we needed to get St. Andrews more into the mainstream.
And you're going to tell me...
We tried to do that, because we introduced the BAISS. Dave took over a leadership role in that, and we got the kids playing against other schools again. We introduced a program of scholarships for students coming from the government schools after a BJC, and that grew to about 6 students. We had Debbie Ferguson was one of them, for example, one of our golden girls.
Yes.
And these kids excelled. So we introduced Interact, which is a junior arm of a Rotary, so that we took children to Sandilands, in the geriatric ward. Sorry.
Keep the thought, because we got to take this final break.
Right.
And you tell me about St. Andrews and the other place that you had, it's the last place you had. You're going to tell me about that and some of your Rotary activities.
Okay.
You're watching Legends Whence We Came. I'm Anthony Newbold. I'm speaking with Roger Kelty. We'll be back after this. Welcome back to this final segment of Legends Whence We Came. I'm Anthony Newbold. I'm speaking with Mr. Roger Kelty. He's been a part of the educational system in the Bahamas for 39 years. St. Andrews, and you are talking about how you helped to integrate St. Andrews into the mainstream of the other schools. Successful integration, you think?
Yes, they became very much more involved in the sporting program, for example, and now they're quite a force in the sporting program. They do exceptionally well for such a small student population, but they're softball, soccer, basketball, they're doing very well now.
And I got to drop this in there because I'm thinking about it as you're talking about it. You're involved with two separate schools, both at a time when they're changing over and they're dealing with this integration thing, eh?
Mm-hmm.
QC in 1965, and you getting that ratio together up there, and you end up with St. Andrews, and you're doing the same thing, what, 20 years later?
Well, there wasn't so much of a need at St. Andrews. St. Andrews was pretty well integrated. When I went there was a good, at least a 50-50 split.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't too much of a problem. It was very similar, to be honest, to the early days, the small student population. You got to know everyone. A lot of parental involvement, which is not the case now at the large schools. But when I first went to QC, for example, parents were always there. You got to know them all, and you got to know the children very well. The same was true at St. Andrews.
The same children, the same parents. Why you get less involvement with a bigger school? It's the same children.
I know, yeah, it's a troubling factor. I feel that to be successful, there has to be students, staff, and parents in a strong, closely bound relationship with a powerful motivation in all three areas. When that happens, the world's your oyster. It's amazing what can be achieved. 7
years at St. Andrews, you've done what you wanted to do, you get another great offer.
Yes, I was kind of headhunted there. Harry Moore, who was probably the dearest flesh and blood figure I've ever encountered, had two daughters who attended St. Andrews before my time. And Dave Jenner, who was my good friend and colleague at the time, he had tutored the two girls. Mm-hmm. And Harry would invite him each summer to go and play golf at Lyford Key. And so Dave naturally took me along as well, and that's when I first met Harry Moore. And we would talk because I was involved in the scholarship program at the schools, finding students and so on, advising them in these respects. And I remember Harry and I talking about the academic scholarships when we had almost a sufficiency of professional people in the legal profession, medical, teachers, lawyers, engineers, and so on. But you couldn't get an air conditioner fixed, your cars would break down. And technologically, I felt we were very far behind, and he tended to agree with me. And he was one of these people, you put an idea in his head, and it would germinate. And
which is why he probably can live quite comfortably in Lyford Key, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. He was a very wealthy man, but totally dedicated to young people. So 2 years later, he phoned me out of the blue and said he wanted me to come out and have lunch with him and talk to him about this technical program, and that's how it was introduced.
Lyford Key Foundation. You are the director of the...
I'm in charge of all the scholarship programs, yeah. Mm-hmm. We have another charitable arm called the Gifts and Grants Committee, which is a giving section of Lyford Key, but I'm purely in the academic side, the academic scholarships.
What haven't you done with the Lyford Key Foundation, that whole scholarship thing? What haven't you done with it that you'd like to do with it? Where'd you like to see it go?
I just like to see it get bigger and bigger, to be honest. That's what I feel. We're probably already the largest non-governmental agency that provides scholarships. But education is just so expensive. And you say middle-class people, they can afford, but they can't afford it. Education is costly for everyone. And without the kind of help that we could provide, I think there's an awful lot of students who just would never be able to even dream of going off to college. Mm-hmm. So,
how many students have passed through the program since you were there?
It's just over 1,000, I'd say. There's about 14 different scholarship programs that I administer there, but the two main ones are the academic ones and the technical ones. Mm-hmm. And then we have about 130 scholarships that we offer at COB as well for students, which is actually administered by the COB people. We just give them the money for it.
How many do you offer a year? You have an average? No?
Well, to be honest, we're going through a bad time from last year because, you know, the global markets following 9/11 were so bad. Most of our funds are endowed to ensure that no student is going to be left stranded. The money is always will be there. So last year we had to cut back in order to fulfill our sort of fiscal responsibilities to donors and so on. But in 1981 we gave out $1.4 million. In 1982, when was 9/11? That was 81 or
2001.
Yeah, well that year was our peak year where we had $1.4 million in scholarships, and we had 340 students going overseas. So that, all with $5,000 scholarships, which was pretty good.
You've been, and you're telling me that we're at the end of the program, Paul Harris Fellow, because you've been involved in Rotary.
Yeah.
100% attendance record. How could you do that?
Good health, I guess. No, I've stayed healthy. You know, for 33 years, I never missed a class or a day at school. And then one day I was brushing my teeth and my back went into spasm. And I could barely crawl back to bed. And you know, Anthony, it was like losing your virginity after that, if I had a bad head or anything like this. But it was just, I guess it became obsessional, you know. Once you have all these years of unbroken attendance, you go to I've gone to all kinds of lengths to preserve it.
Anything you still want to do that you haven't done?
Retire? No, that's not true. I don't really look forward to retirement. I sometimes wonder what you'd feel like getting up in the morning and saying, well, what am I going to do today?
Yeah.
You can only play golf so many times. You don't have to play every day of the week. No, and this is such a lovely job anyway, with the Life at Key Foundation, so fulfilling and so rewarding that I enjoy it very much.
As I enjoyed the interview.
Anthony, thank you very much, man. I feel very honored that you should ask me to be on the program.
Thank you very much for
so
coming. And I'm sure all those students who you've had over the years, QC and St. Andrews, College of the Bahamas, I'm sure they appreciate it too. Thank you again. And thank you for watching. You've been watching Legends Whence We Came. My guest has been Mr. Roger Kelty, who's been a part of education in the Bahamas for 39 years. I'm Anthony Newbold. Good night.